Folks, hello and welcome to Tavern Chat. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, and there are days where I go down rabbit holes and I find interesting stuff. And today, for the first time that I can recall, I found the Simulacrum blog. OSR simulacrum.blogspot.com, Simulacrum exploring OSR design. And there's a lot here to digest. If you want a perspective on the OSR that is pretty much scholarly, this is the place to go. But I was reading some articles today, and there's a lot that I want to probably talk about over the next couple of weeks, months, God knows how long. But this one paragraph really struck me because we all tend to have a wishy-washy definition of what the OSR is. We don't even know what R stands for: old school, revival, resurrection, uh, role playing. Now, there's a lot to be said about this paragraph. I'm going to start reading it. Old school was very clear when used in its original context. In the places where it was born, there was no need to specify old school D&D because that was obvious. And you know what? I'm not arguing that point. Even I today might say OSR includes like classic travel and RuneQuest, but it didn't when the OSR was first being established, defined. It was old school D&D. It was simulacrums, it was clones, it was house rules. It was old school D&D. One of the earliest arguments I can remember on social media was, is DTRPG really old school? I mean, it's old school in feel. It's old school in play, but the engine is pretty much third edition, right? 3X. And there's another part where the author goes over different aspects of what is OSR. He has great disdain for commercial OSR, but again, that's another video. Um, there was no need to specify old school D&D because that was obvious. No more than you would feel the need to add Ford to the name of a Ford-based movement about old Fords on a Ford forum. It could be taken for granted. And that's true. And maybe it should be OSR for old school D&D and OSG for old school gaming. There's no leadership to this stuff, folks. There's no one person or one organization that defines this shit. It's all a discussion amongst us. I find the discussion that I'm currently reading to be very interesting. However, after some 15 years of playing telephone across multiple social media outlets, each time seeing various core components of the OSR stripped away, it created a lot of vagueness and even hostility. Because you want your favorite game to be considered OSR. Right? It's Shadow Dark OSR. I think it is certainly OSR adjacent. It's OSR in principle. Um, if you're calling Mark Borg OSR, then Shadow Dark certainly is. Are there degrees of OSR? Maybe. Back to it. Um, it created a lot of vagueness and even hostility as gamers sensed being ostracized and ignorant of the movement's history. Treat being presented with the original definition of OSR as an exclusionary effort attempting to take ownership of the concept of old school in general. In retrospect, maybe calling this movement OSR as opposed to OSD, OS Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know. Maybe there was a little bit of entitlement to say it's old school role playing. Um, I can understand both sides of this argument. They're both valid arguments depending on the perspective of the person that you're taking. So, the result is that when someone tells another that no, Traveler or RuneQuest or Rollmaster or whatever is not OSR, the person being told doesn't hear that it's not an accurate label for those. This is no judgment of the quality of these games. Arbitrary dates alone are no rung on which to hang a design movement, right? Because we've always had that argument. When does the OSR end? With 2E, the beginning of 2E, with the 2E splat books, with the 2E player option books that could end with the beginning of 3E. And that's not, the OSR is kind of like the old definition for porn. You know it when you see it, right? And I guess everybody's definition can be a little bit different. But yes, it has certainly morphed over the years. And it's a marketing point these days too, right? To call your product OSR is a market that you're appealing to. So instead to hear I am declaring a game like to be insufficiently old school with the implication that old school equals authentic and not old school equals shallow, bad. It's an emotional response, one born out of a focus of the old school part of OSR. The fact that the R stands for usually role playing, revival, resurrection. The issue is when the OSR was formed, and I was not there at the beginning, I came in shortly thereafter. I was pretty much out of gaming, maybe lurking. OSR is a great marketing term, right? But it doesn't say old school Dungeons and Dragons. It just doesn't say it. Those of us that were there at the beginning, near the beginning, knew what the intent was. But we are now 15 years gone on, longer. This article was written in, I think, the end of 21. So, yeah, this is even more so today than it was in years past. This is a discussion. And nobody is taking up the old school gaming OSG. But we got the Pro SR, we got the new SR, we got the OSR is a label that people want to market with. That's not going to change. And as long as it's marketable, people want it, publishers want it to embrace a very large swath. That's just my take on it. The person pointing out that perhaps discussions of old Nissans, no matter how capable or how aged the vehicle they are, don't belong on a forum for old Fords, becomes that most dreaded of elitist figures, the gatekeeper. Yeah. OSR, those of us that were there at the founding or early on with the OSR, honestly, we're happy for the new blood, but the new blood doesn't necessarily have our history. And therein lies the crux of this. So, folks, on that note, I'll be continuing with more on this series, definitely. Let me know what you think. Give me your thoughts. Comment, like, subscribe. You know the thing. Other than that, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice, roll them well. I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. if this ever lets me out.